welcome once again to Living Off the Slab. This time we're going to do part 2 of our video series on the future of motorcycling. So today what we're going to talk about are some of the obstacles, some of the potential problems that motorcycling community and the motorcycle industry is going to be facing in the near future. So now that we've established some numbers about the state of the motorcycle industry here in the United States, let's move on to some factors that are going to be affecting it in the future. So first of all, we do have some generational issues that we're facing, right? Primarily, we need to look at 3 generations. That's the baby boomers, Generation X, and then what we call the millennials. So first, I want to talk about my generation, the baby boomers, right? Because we are the guys that have been pushing motorcycle sales, well, over the last about 30 years or so, right? We are the ones who, after we had kids and we were getting into be in our 40s and our 50s, we decided we wanted to return to motorcycling, and we're the ones that created that big bubble between the mid-90s and 2007. And to be honest with you, we're still the ones that are going to be pushing motorcycle sales probably for the next 10 or 15 years. So why is that true? Why are the baby boomers pushing motorcycle sales? Well, because there were so many of us. We were born between roughly 1945 and 1965, and there were 76 million of us. So whatever we decided to do within the American culture, well, it became a big deal just because there were so many of us. So the problem is that we boomers are getting older, right? The leading edge of us are now up in our 70s, right? The tail end of us are just about to cross that 60 line. That's about where I am right now, right? So we are thinking about getting out of motorcycling. Some of us have gotten out of motorcycling, or we're on probably the last bike that we are going to buy. I know that's probably my case, right? I've got 2 great bikes. I am in no hurry to trade those in and get anything new, right? Even though there's a lot of cool stuff out there, right? I don't know if I really want to take on another payment again at this point in my life, right? I'm thinking about retirement. However, please don't infer from that that we boomers aren't still riding, because we still are. As I said, we are just on our last bikes probably, so we won't be contributing to those new bike sales. So the generation that followed the baby boomers, well, that was Generation X. They were born between 1965 and 1981, and they were a bit smaller than the baby boomers, and they numbered about 55 million people. So the problem for the Gen Xers were that they were a smaller generation and they followed the baby boomers, right? So being that the baby boomers were so big, well, nobody really paid much attention to the Gen Xers, and to be honest with you, they still don't. Right? As far as motorcycles go, well, even Robert Pandya told me that there was never really a marketing strategy that was put together to try to get the Gen Xers to ride motorcycles. Now they did, not quite at the rate that the baby boomers did, but they still adopted motorcycling. But they just never needed to come up with a strategy for the Gen Xers because there were so many baby boomers buying and pushing the sales of new bikes. So the generation that everybody hopes is going to save motorcycling is, of course, the Millennial Generation. And those people were born between about 1981 and the year 2000, and they number about 66 million people. And just last year, the Millennial Generation surpassed the baby boomers as the largest U.S. generation that is currently living today. So the millennials make up that coveted 18 to 34 age group, that demographic that everybody wants, right? And the problem is that they have not been adopting motorcycling at the rates of the previous generations, that is the boomers and the Gen Xers. So one big difference between my generation and the millennial generation of today is that we baby boomers were basically raised as free-range kids. Right? We came home from schools and we immediately hit the doors and we were out playing in the neighborhood with our friends completely unsupervised. On the weekends, we jumped on our bicycles, we hit the road, and we didn't come back until dinner time. Just the way things were, we were very independent kids. So being that we baby boomers had a more kind of lax upbringing, right, we were more likely to adopt adventurous pastimes like motorcycling. Right? millennials of today, they've been taught that safety is a major concern in life, right? So they are much less likely to adopt things like motorcycling than we were. One statistic that I find very telling about the millennials is that they are the generation that is least likely to ever get a driver's license, right? About something around 17% of them, from what I have read, do not ever bother to get a driver's license, right? They just don't need them, right? They live in cities, right? They use public transportation. They have now Uber available, right? They can get by, again, without having cars, without even having a driver's license. Now, there are some who suggest that the primary reason that millennials don't get into motorcycling is an economic one, right? They look at the high rates of student loan debt and they say millennials just don't have the money to get into sports like motorcycling. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I don't have any kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I have plenty of friends who are millennials, and I don't see any of them sitting around and eating rice and beans and not going out and having a good time. In fact, just the opposite. I see them traveling, I see them going to concerts, I see them getting involved in a number of sporting activities other than motorcycling. Like the Spartan races, for example. A lot of the millennials I know are really into doing these kinds of things. In fact, here's a couple of interesting tidbits that I found out about millennials. One, they are adopting golf as a pastime at roughly the same rate as the Gen Xers and the baby boomers that came before them. Right? And golf is not particularly an inexpensive sport, right? Clubs are not expensive. Green fees, all of those things that go along with the sport are not inexpensive. Another thing that the millennials are adopting along with golf is the pastime of camping and RVing. Right? The RV industry is on a boom right now from primarily two reasons. One, the retirement of the baby boomers. We are getting rid of our motorcycles and we are buying RVs. But also there are a number of young millennial families, right, those who are now up in their mid-30s, who are deciding to go out and buy small RVs so they can take their family camping. Right? So here is an activity that they can do together as a family, have that adventure in things that we found on motorcycles, but for them, they're finding it in an RV. And again, RVs aren't exactly cheap. So they are spending their money, right? And they do have money to spend. They're just doing it on different things. Now, from the things that I have read, most marketers think that millennials do things for different reasons than we boomers did. Right? We boomers, to a large extent, were all about the acquisition of stuff. Right? The more toys you die with, right, the better. Right? So we went out and we had to have the biggest house, the big McMansion. We had to have multiple cars. We had to have big motorcycles, multiple motorcycles, maybe a boat, and all this other kind of stuff. All of these toys that we could play with. Well, for the millennials, it is more about the experiences. And I think if you look at the things that they are spending their money on, camping, for example, right? They don't really care how fancy the RV is. In fact, they're buying small ones. What they want is that experience with their family when they go out and they do camping. In researching this video, I did run across a few articles that were written by younger bikers, younger motorcyclists. And I found it very telling when they started describing how they view the older generations, right? They look at us and they basically see a bunch of old guys that go out and play dress up on the weekends. Again, and I know some of you will get upset with that and might even find it offensive, but it is very telling, right? And you think about it, right? How did you look at your elders when you were a kid, right? Did you want to be associated with what your mom and dad did, or did you want to go out and strike your own path? Well, I think that's where we are now, right? The guys that are younger and that are interested in getting into motorcycling just aren't buying what the older generations are selling. So given that, the motorcycle industry is going to have to make a decision, right? How much do they go after us old guys, right? We're still going to be buying bikes for the next few years, right? So they have to keep us in mind. But also they have to think about the future, right? So they're going to have to make bikes. They're going to have to change their clothing designs. They're going to have to change, right, how they try to appeal to this younger generation, right? They're going to have to probably get away from, oh, my bike is, you know, big and loud and powerful, to, look, this is a bike you can go to the beach and hang out with your friends on. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, but it's definitely going to have to change. All right, folks, I think that's it for video number 2. Next time we will talk about some potential solutions to these problems, at least the ones that were presented by Give a Shift. And of course, I'm going to want to hear what your solutions might be as well. All right, and as always, if you feel like helping out this channel, please check out the ways to do that in the video description, and you can learn more about Give a Shift also from the links in the video description. So we'll see you next time.